picture this scene in your mind. It is the very early hours of July 10th, 1806. We are in the Carnatic region of South India. The sun hasn't fully risen yet over the massive granite ramparts of the Vellore fort. The air is thick, humid, typical of the Tamil Nadu summer, but suddenly the morning silence is just shattered.
It smells of gunpowder.
It smells of gunpowder, there is screaming, there is chaos. But what catches your eye isn't just the smoke rising from the barracks, it's a flag being hoisted up the main flagstaff.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. It is not the Union Jack.
No, it's a flag with tiger stripes.
The royal insignia of Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore.
Exactly.
Inside that fort, British officers, the masters of the universe at this point in history, are being gunned down by their own men. The native sepoys have taken control. To an observer standing there, it looks, for all the world, like the start of a massive revolution, a full 50 years before the famous Revolt of 1857. This is the Vellore Mutiny. It was bloody, it was incredibly dramatic, and yet it failed.
It did, and today we're going to find out why.
It's a fascinating story, isn't it? And one that often gets overshadowed by 1857.
It really does, but historically, you could argue it's just as significant. It's the moment where the resistance, changed its very shape.
Absolutely. And we are going to unpack every single detail of that change. But before we march into the fort and dodge the bullets, I have a very important mission for you, the listener. We are diving deep into history here, specifically for our friends preparing for the big exams, like the UPSC.
That's right.
If you are enjoying this deep dive, if this is the kind of content you find useful, I humbly ask you to subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel. We are pouring a lot of energy into making these dense topics accessible, and honestly, your subscription makes a huge difference.
And for those who are able, support on Patreon is, well, it's vital to keep us going. It helps us bring this super useful content to you week after week, ensuring we can keep the lights on and the research deep. It's not an exaggeration to say we couldn't do this without that support.
A massive, massive shout out to all our current supporters. You guys are the real MVPs. This content literally wouldn't exist without you. Please don't forget to like this audio and share your valuable comments. We want to hear your take on history. What surprised you? What do you want more of?
We really do read the comments, and it helps shape what we do next.
For sure. And hey, for the serious learners out there, important notification. Free notes with practice previous year questions, or PYQs, are available right now on our Telegram channel. The link is in the description.
And if you want to take your preparation to the absolute elite level, direct message us on the public Telegram channel to join the private library. That is where you get premium access, all the videos in this series, organized premium notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers. It's a treasure trove that will save you hundreds of hours of note-taking.
Okay, strictly business now. Let's set the stage. Today we are doing a deep dive into the Tamil Nadu Board Class 12 history book, specifically Chapter 10, covering the Vellore Mutiny. And my first question to you is, why does this specific mutiny matter so much? Is it just because it happened first?
Well, that's part of it, of course. But the real mission of this deep dive, I think, is to understand a fundamental shift in the very DNA of Indian resistance. We are witnessing the transition from what historians call feudal resistance to Sepoy resistance.
Feudal versus Sepoy. That sounds a bit academic. Let's break that down for everyone. What's the real difference?
Sure. Think about the late 18th century. Who was fighting the British? It was the kings, the chieftains. The Palyakars, or Polygars as the British called them. They were fighting to save their crowns, their tax rights, their territory.
So, a top-down resistance. The ruler decides to fight, and his people follow him into battle.
Precisely. But by 1806, those kings were largely dead or defeated. The Palyakar system had been dismantled. So the Vellore Mutiny wasn't led by a king, at least not initially. It was the common soldier, the sepoy, rising up against the system from within.
So the resistance moved from the palace to the barracks.
That's the perfect way to put it. And that changes everything about how the resistance looked and felt. It becomes a different kind of war.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock. Before we get to the explosion in 1806, we have to look at what was happening in Tamil Nadu leading up to this. The source material talks about the context of resistance. It wasn't like everyone was happy and peaceful and then suddenly got mad on a Tuesday in July.
Not at all. Tamil Nadu had been a hotbed, a literal war zone of resistance for decades. The text references Chapter 9 extensively here, pointing to the Palyakar rebellions. You simply can't understand the anger of the Vellore Sepoy without understanding the trauma of the Polygar Wars.
These names are legendary in South Indian history. Pulithivar, Kadaboman, the Marudu brothers.
Let's unpack them a bit because they set the precedent. You had Pulithevar leading the western bloc of Palayakars. He was one of the very first to put up a really organized fight. Then you had Veerapandiya Kadabomman leading the eastern bloc from his fort at Panchalam Karuchi.
And the Marudu brothers, they tried to take it a step further, didn't they? The source mentions the South Indian Confederacy. That sounds incredibly organized for the late 18th century. Usually we think of these local chieftains as fighting their own isolated battles.
That's the common misconception, yeah. The Marudu brothers were visionaries in a way. Along with their allies, they actually issued the Tiruchirappalli Proclamation. It was a call to arms. They were trying to unite different chieftains, irrespective of caste or creed, against the common enemy, the British.
So they were trying to build a united front.
They were. But, and this is the crucial distinction we need to make, what was the nature of their fight? What were they fighting for?
Well, as you said, they were chieftains, local rulers. They were fighting for their kingdoms.
Exactly. The text describes their resistance as feudal. They were fighting for their territorial interests, their right to collect taxes, their traditional authority. It was the revolt of the Palayakars. They wanted to preserve the old feudal order where they were the masters of their domain.
Right, so Kadabomman is fighting for his kingdom sovereignty. Pulithevar is fighting for his influence. They are heroes, undoubtedly, but they are fighting a vertical war leader to subject. Their primary interest is their own land, their own power.
Precisely. But by 1801, with the Carnatic Treaty, the British had largely crushed the system. The Palayakar system came to a violent end. The company introduced the Zamindari settlement. The chieftains were, well, they were liquidated or pacified.
The text uses some strong language here. It mentions the suppression was savage.
It was. And we really need to sit with that word savage for a moment. In 1801, the British didn't just win a war. They conducted what you could almost call a purge. The Marudu brothers were executed at Tirupattur. Kadabomman's brother, Umatharai, was publicly beheaded at Panchalam Karuchi.
A public beheading. That's not just an execution. That's a message of terror.
Absolutely. And it didn't stop there. 73 of the principal rebels were sentenced to transportation banish to places like Penang, which is modern-day Malaysia. Imagine being ripped from your home and sent across the sea, never to return. The entire region was left in a state of terror.
So the kings are gone. The forts are dismantled, the weapons are seized, the old order is completely shattered.
The kings are gone. But the people, the soldiers who fought for those kings, the families who watched their leaders get beheaded, they are still there. And the anger didn't vanish, it just went underground.
And that brings us to Vellore. Vellore is described in the text as a well-fortified, beautiful city. It was the capital of the erstwhile North Arcot district. It sounds like a stronghold.
It was a massive stronghold, a key strategic location. And crucially, after the wars, it became a major garrison town for the East India Company. And who did the British hire to fill the ranks of their army in the south?
I'm guessing. The locals.
Yeah.
The very men whose previous employers they had just executed.
Exactly. The very men, or the sons of the men, who had fought in the Palayakar rebellions. The text explicitly mentioned that the Sepoys could not forget their original loyalties. They were serving the British for a paycheck, but in their hearts, they remembered the slaughter of 1801. They remembered who had destroyed their way of life.
That is such a powerful insight. So when we look at the Sepoys in Vellore, we aren't looking at loyal subjects of the British crown. We are looking at a defeated army that has been forced to wear the uniform of the victor.
That is the perfect way to put it. It's a pressure cooker. The heat is already on. The resistance shifted from feudal, where the king leads the fight for his land, to Sepoy, where the soldier realizes, wait a minute, the king is gone, but I have the gun now. I can do something about this.
So the pot is simmering. The historical grievances are there, deep and personal. But usually, for a mutiny to happen, you need more than just old anger. You need a trigger. You need something that makes daily life unbearable. Let's get into section 2 of our outline, the powder keg.
Right. And the source highlights a few underlying grievances that kept the heat turned up long before the final spark. First, the text talks about this inferiority complex, and it's very blunt about it. The British treated the Indian Sepoys as fundamentally inferior. There was a strong, pervasive racial prejudice.
That's the psychological base for all these mutinies, isn't it? It's not just about policy. It's about dignity. Being treated like dirt in your own land, being told you are less human, less intelligent, less honorable because of your skin color or your language.
Exactly. It grinds you down day after day. It creates this constant state of humiliation. But you need a spark. You need an immediate trigger. And in this story, our antagonist, if we can call him that, is Sir John Cradock.
The commander-in-chief of the Madras Army.
Yes, Sir John Cradock. And we shouldn't forget he had the full approval of the governor of Madras, Lord William Bentinck.
Which is so interesting because Bentinck is usually remembered as a reformer later on in his career. The governor-general who abolished sati, suppressed thuggy. He has this liberal reputation.
He does. But here, in 1806, he's a younger man, and he's approving some very controversial, very insensitive orders. It seems he hadn't yet learned the nuances of Indian culture and religion.
So Cradock, with Bentinck's blessing, introduces new army regulations. And these weren't just about how to march or how to shoot a musket. They were about how to look.
They were about identity, and the first and most famous one was the turban.
The turban. This is the thing everyone remembers about Vellore.
It was the Agni Pariksha, so to speak, the trial by fire. They introduced a new form of turban. The text says it resembled a European hat.
Now, I have to play the skeptic here for a moment. To a modern listener, or even to the British officers at the time, a hat is a hat, a uniform is a uniform. Why is this a trigger for a bloody mutiny where hundreds of people die? It seems trivial on the surface.
It seems trivial if you look at it through a secular, modern, Western lens. But you have to put yourself in the shoes of a conservative Indian sepoy in 1806. A turban is not just a piece of cloth, it's a profound symbol of dignity, of honor. It indicates your caste, your region, your religious identity.
It's part of who you are.
It is who you are. Replacing it with something that looks like a European hat was bad enough. It was seen as an attempt to make them look less Indian. But there was a specific detail, a component of this new turban that's made it explosive.
The leather cockade.
Yes. The new turban included a leather cockade, a rosette, or a crest made of leather. Now, where does leather come from?
From an animal. Usually cow or pigskin.
Exactly. For a high-caste Hindu sepoy, the cow is sacred. The idea of wearing the skin of a sacred animal on his head, the most sacred part of the body, was a profound act of religious pollution. For a Muslim sepoy, the pig is haram, or forbidden. They couldn't be sure what animal the leather came from.
So for both major religious groups in the army, this is a direct violation of their faith.
A huge violation. It wasn't just a uniform change. It was seen as a deliberate attack on their dharma, their religion.
And it wasn't just the hat, right? The source mentions other prohibitions that came with this new code.
No, it went much further. The orders prohibited sepoys from wearing earrings. Now, in South India, especially in that era, ear piercing and wearing earrings was a very common cultural and religious practice for men in certain communities. Prohibiting it is essentially saying, you cannot be a Tamil man while you are a soldier, you must be a company man.
That is stripping away their identity piece by piece.
And it gets even more invasive. They were prohibited from wearing caste marks on their foreheads while on duty. The vibhuti, the sacred ash for Saivites, or the namam, the sandalwood paste for Vaishnavites. These aren't decorations. These are daily religious rituals.
It's like telling a Christian soldier he can't wear a cross.
A very apt comparison. And on top of all that, the grooming standards. They were ordered to be clean-shaven on the chin and to trim their mustaches to a standard regulation length.
In that culture, a mustache is a symbol of masculinity, of virility, of honor.
Absolutely. To be forced to shave it or trim it to the specifications of a foreign master, it was seen as emasculating. It was a personal insult.
I can see why they were furious. It's not just fashion, it's a systematic insult. It's an erasure of who they are, culturally, religiously, and personally.
The sepoys interpreted this as a direct, calculated insult to their religious and social traditions. But more dangerous than the insult was the fear it generated. The text explicitly mentions a widespread belief, a rumor that spread like wildfire through the barracks, that these changes were the first step to converting all soldiers to Christianity.
The fear of conversion. That is a powerful motivator. If you believe your eternal soul is at stake, you fight back with everything you have.
Precisely. They thought first the hat, then the cross. They believed if they accepted this new turban, they would be excommunicated by their families, they would lose their place in society and their community, they couldn't go home again. So when they rebelled, they weren't fighting for a pay raise or better conditions, they were fighting for their very existence, both in this world and the next.
So the pot is boiling over. The historical grievances are the fuel. The racial prejudice is the heat. The new regulations, especially the turban, are the spark. But a mutiny usually needs some organization. You can't just have 1,000 guys wake up angry at the same time without talking to each other. This brings us to Section 3. The buildup and the warnings.
And this is where the story gets cinematic. It takes on the feel of a conspiracy thriller. We need to talk about who else was living inside the Vellore fort. It wasn't just the British and the Sepoys.
It was the family of Tipu Sultan.
The Tiger of Mysore himself. He had been killed in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War in 1799, just 7 years prior. But his family, his sons, his daughters, his entire retinue of servants and followers were detained as state prisoners inside Vellore fort.
That seems monumentally unwise. Keeping the family of your greatest, most charismatic enemy inside a fort garrisoned by your own native troops. Troops who might have been loyal to him, or at least from the region he ruled.
In hindsight, it was a catastrophic error, a massive intelligence failure. The British thought they were keeping them close to watch them. Instead, they placed a living, breathing, rallying symbol right in the center of the barracks, surrounded by resentful soldiers.
A symbol of the old, glorious order.
Exactly. And the text tells us that before the mutiny, secret meetings were held. Tipu's family wasn't just passively sitting there, they were actively involved in fanning the flames.
We have names, too. The source mentions Feta Hyder.
Tipu's first son, the heir, and another prince, Moizuddin. They weren't just sitting around mourning their father, they were active in planning the execution of the mutiny. The text mentions that Feta Hyder tried to form an alliance against the English. He was a diplomat, even in exile.
Who is he reaching out to?
He was seeking help from the Marathas and even the French.
The French, of course, that old connection. Tipu was a famous Francophile. He had French engineers, French advisors. He saw them as the only European power that could help him counter the British. That makes sense his son would try to rekindle that alliance.
It does, and Feta Hyder was receiving information and passing messages through a man named Muhammad Malik. So you have a real conspiracy brewing right under the British noses. They are smuggling messages out of the fort, holding secret meetings in the palace quarters of the fort.
It's amazing they weren't caught.
It speaks to the solidarity among the Indians in the fort and the arrogance of the British, who likely weren't looking too closely.
And there were warning signs. It wasn't a total surprise, or at least it shouldn't have been. The text calls it a dress rehearsal.
Yes, in May 1806. This is 2 full months before the big outbreak. The 4th Regiment rose in revolt against the new turban. They flat out refused to wear it.
What happened? Did the British listen? Did they think, maybe this is a bad idea?
The British did what they always did in these situations. They crushed it immediately and brutally. The commander-in-chief, Cradock, took severe action. The guilty sepoys were brought to a court-martial. 19 of them were punished with 500 to 900 lashes each.
900 lashes. I want to pause on that number. That's not a punishment, that's torture. That's nearly a death sentence inflicted over hours.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be a public spectacle of terror, to frighten every other sepoy into submission. But as often happens with brutality, instead of creating fear, it instilled a burning desire for revenge. It hardened their resolve. The other sepoys watched their comrades being flayed alive for refusing a hat, and they didn't think, I should obey. They thought, I'm going to kill the man holding the whip.
So the dress rehearsal just made the main performance inevitable.
It poured gasoline on the fire.
And
then we have the moment that history turns on, the ignored warning. I love these what-if moments in history.
too. It's where you see the role of individual human error.
It is June 17th, 1806, less than a month before the mutiny. There's a specific anecdote in the source about a sepoy from the 1st Regiment named Mustafa Beg. He's a Muslim soldier, and he breaks ranks, essentially. He becomes an informant.
He goes to the British.
He secretly informs his commanding officer, Colonel Forbes.
What did he tell him? Did he just say, the men are unhappy?
No, the text is clear he was incredibly specific. He told him everything. He said there was a plot to exterminate the European officers and troops. He laid it all out. They are planning to kill you all on a specific date.
And Colonel Forbes, what did he do with this bombshell intelligence?
He ignored it.
He just ignored it. A direct warning of a plot to exterminate him and his men. How is that possible?
The text says he did not take it seriously. We can only speculate why. Perhaps he thought Mustafa Beg was a disgruntled soldier looking for a reward or trying to get rivals in trouble. Or maybe it was just pure, unadulterated arrogance, the belief that the British were untouchable, that their loyal sepoys would never dare do such a thing.
It's just a fatal mistake. It highlights the total lack of trust in communication. The British couldn't distinguish between a loyal informant and what they probably saw as just another complaining native.
Exactly. He dismissed the one man who could have saved them all. So the warning is ignored, the conspiracy matures, the date is set, and we arrive at Section 4, the outbreak.
July 10th, 1806. The early hours of the morning. The fort is quiet.
The native sepoys of the 1st and the 23rd Regiments are on duty. They control the guard posts, the armory, and at around 2 a.m. they begin the revolt.
And the violence is immediate. This isn't a protest march, it's a coordinated attack.
It is a slaughter. Colonel Fancourt, the commander of the garrison, is the first victim. He's shot and killed near his residence. Then Colonel Oris, the commander of the 23rd Regiment, he's shot down right on the parade ground as he comes out to see what the noise is about.
So they were targeting the leadership first.
Systematically, Major Armstrong is killed. The text says about a dozen other officers were gunned down in the first wave. The British officers are waking up to gunfire, stepping out of their quarters, and dying.
It must have been absolute chaos. Total confusion for the British.
For them, yes. But for the sepoys, it was a plan in action. And amidst the gunfire, they make a powerful political statement. This is crucial for our mission of understanding the shift. They go to the palace quarters and proclaim Feta Hyder as the new ruler.
They anoint a new king.
And then the visual that you started the episode with, they go to the main flagstaff, tear down the Union Jack, and hoist the tiger-striped flag of Tipu Sultan.
That is such a powerful image. It signifies that this wasn't just a mutiny about a turban anymore. This was a revolution.
Yes. As the text analyzes, this was a clear attempt to restore the old Muslim rule, specifically the Mysore authority, in the region. They were trying to roll back the British conquest by 2 decades. They were saying, the company is gone, the tiger is back.
So the fort is theirs. The British officers are dead or hiding in the ramparts. It looks like a victory. They have the guns, they have the fort, they have the prince. But Section 5 is ominously titled the Suppression.
The British response was terrifyingly fast and efficient. There was an officer, a Major Coots, who was outside the fort when the mutiny began. He managed to escape the initial gunfire.
He wasn't trapped inside.
No, and that was the crucial bit of luck for the British. He gets on his horse and dashes to Ranipet.
Ranipet is about 14 miles away, right? A decent distance.
Right. Imagine that ride. A desperate, frantic gallop through the pre-dawn darkness. He knows that if he doesn't get help, every European left inside that fort is going to die. He gets there and informs the commander of the cavalry cantonment, Colonel Gillespie. This is at 7 a.m.
Colonel Gillespie. He's the savior for the British in this story, but he's about to become the angel of death for the sepoys.
He acts instantly. The timeline here is just incredible. He gets the news at 7 a.m. He immediately musters a squadron of cavalry and some artillery. He reaches Vellore Fort by 9 a.m.
2 hours. He covers 14 miles with troops and guns in 2 hours. He doesn't wait for the infantry. He just goes.
He just goes. It's a textbook example of rapid response.
And when he gets there, the gates are shut, presumably. The sepoys control the fort.
They are, but Gillespie is a man of action. The source says he had galloper guns, light mobile artillery. He orders them to blow the gate open, and once the British cavalry charged into that enclosed space, it wasn't a battle. It was a massacre.
How many casualties?
The numbers are sickening. The text says 800 Indian soldiers were found dead in the fort alone.
800. That's a slaughter. That's not a skirmish. In an enclosed space, that is just methodical killing.
It was retribution. The British wanted to send a message written in blood: do not touch the officers, do not touch the flag. 600 more soldiers were taken prisoner and locked up in Taruchi and Vellore.
And their fate.
The source says some were later hanged, some were blown from cannons, some shot dead. The uprising was brought to a, quote, bloody end.
So by lunchtime, essentially the revolution that started at 2 a.m. is completely over.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
From 2 a.m. to 9 a.m., the sepoys held the fort. By 10 or 11 a.m., it was over and the cleanup had begun.
Let's move to Section 6. Consequences and historical analysis. The dust settles, the bodies are cleared. What happens next? What's the fallout?
Well, the British leadership, both in Madras and London, realized they messed up badly. First, they have to deal with the symbol of the revolt, Tipu's family.
Right. Feta Hyder. He was the king for a few hours.
Exactly. The British can't risk that again. So the entire family is sent away to Calcutta.
Why Calcutta?
It was the capital of British India. It was far away from the action, far away from their supporters in the south. In Vellore, they were revered royalty. In Calcutta, they were just pensioners under constant surveillance. It neutralized them completely as a political force.
And what about the men responsible for the Turban order? Cradock and Bentinck?
Accountability was served, surprisingly. The commander-in-chief, Sir John Cradock, the man with the hat idea, is recalled to England in disgrace. And the governor of Madras, Lord William Bentinck, is also recalled.
So there was an admission of failure at the highest levels. They realized this wasn't just bad natives, it was bad leadership. They had provoked this.
They did. The controversial army regulations were withdrawn, but the big question, and the one the source text really wants us to think about, is why did the mutiny fail? It had the element of surprise. It had the numbers inside the fort.
It seemed to have a strong start. They achieved all their initial objectives.
The expert analysis in the text points to three main reasons. First, a lack of proper leadership during the crisis. Feudal was proclaimed ruler, but was he a military commander leading the troops on the ground? Not really. He was a prince in exile, not a general.
So there was no one giving orders once Gillespie arrived. It was just chaos.
It seems so. Second, it wasn't well organized beyond the initial attack. It was explosive but chaotic. Once they took the fort, they didn't seem to know what to do next. They looted, they celebrated, but they didn't prepare defenses or try to spread the rebellion outside the walls.
And the third reason?
Lack of civilian support. And this is a key difference between Vellore in 1806 and the Great Revolt of 1857. In 1857, the rebellion spread from the barracks to the villages, the peasants, the landlords. Here, in Vellore, it was largely contained within the fort walls. The city of Vellore didn't rise up with them. It remained an isolated military affair.
That leads us perfectly into the great debate. This is the part I find really interesting for our UPSC listeners, because it's all about historical interpretation. Was this the first war of independence?
The source material presents several conflicting views, which is great because it shows that history isn't a set of facts, it's an argument.
Let's go through them. First up, V.D. Savarkar, a very influential and controversial figure.
Savarkar, in his book The Indian War of Independence, calls the Vellore Mutiny the prelude to the First War of Indian Independence of 1857. For him, it's the opening act. He sees a direct line, a continuous struggle. He wants to establish this grand lineage of resistance.
Okay, so that's one view. Then there is N. Sanjeevi.
Sanjeevi, another historian, proclaims that the Tamils took the real lead in the Indian freedom struggle. This is a perspective that emphasizes the regional origins of the resistance. It's a point of regional pride, and historically accurate. The South was fighting these major battles long before 1857.
What about K. Rajan?
Rajan argues it was a direct continuation of the Marudu brothers' resistance. He sees it as part of that South Indian Confederacy spirit, just transitioning from the chieftains' armies into the company's army. This aligns perfectly with our feudal to sepoy thesis.
But not everyone agrees. The source mentions K.K. Pillai.
Right. K.K. Pillai, a very respected academic historian, rejects the thesis that it was a direct prelude to the 1857 revolt. He likely sees them as separate events with separate localized dynamics. After all, there was a 50-year gap. There was no living memory connecting the two events directly.
So on one hand, you have the nationalist historians seeing a grand narrative, and on the other, you have academic historians pointing out the differences.
Exactly, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. When you compare them, the similarities are just striking.
Let's list them out. What's similar between Vellore 1806 and Meerut 1857?
In both cases, you have Sepoy grievances at the core. In both, you have religious fears acting as the immediate trigger. In 1806, it was the turban with its leather cockade. In 1857, it was the greased cartridges, also rumored to be coated in cow and pig fat.
So the specifics are different, but the theme is identical. A perceived attack on religion through military regulation.
Identical. And in both cases, you have this undercurrent of racial prejudice as the baseline, the feeling of being treated as inferiors in your own land.
The difference is mostly scale, then.
Scale and spread. 1857 was widespread across North India and had significant civilian participation. Vellore was localized to one fort. But the DNA of the revolt, the fundamental cause is very, very similar. Vellore provided the blueprint.
All right. Are you ready for a challenge?
Always.
It's time for Section 7, the Simplified UPSC Focus. We're going to run an interactive quiz based on the model questions from the source text. Listeners, see if you can answer these before the expert does. These are exactly the kind of factual questions you might see in prelims.
Let's do it.
Question 1, we talked about him earlier. Who was the commander-in-chief during the Vellore Mutiny?
That would be Sir John Cradock, the man behind the turban.
Correct. Question 2, when the mutiny broke out, who was the officer outside the fort who managed to dash to Ranipet to seek help?
That was Major Coots. He's the one who alerted Colonel Gillespie.
Spot on. Question 3, after the mutiny was crushed, where was Tipu's son, Feudal, sent?
He and his family were sent to Calcutta to get them out of the South and under close watch.
Correct. Question 4, true or false? A sepoy named Mustafa Beg forewarned Colonel Forbes about the mutiny.
True, and tragically he was ignored. A classic intelligence failure.
Now let's pivot to a mains perspective. A potential essay question could be, examine the causes for the outbreak of the Vellore Mutiny of 1806. How would you structure that answer for maximum marks based on our source?
That's a great question. To write a high-scoring answer, you need structure. I would break it down into 3 distinct parts. First, the underlying or long-term causes. Here, you discuss the legacy of the Palyakar Wars, the loss of patronage for the sepoys who once served native rulers, and the pervasive racial prejudice of the British officers. That's your historical context.
Okay, that's the foundation. What's next?
Second, the immediate cause. This is the powder keg itself. The military reforms of Sir John Cradock. You have to be specific here. I mentioned the new turban, the leather cockade, the prohibition of caste marks and earrings, and the new grooming standards for beards and mustaches. Give the details.
And the third part?
The third part is the psychological catalyst, the fear of conversion to Christianity. You need to explain why these regulations weren't just seen as insults, but as part of a sinister plot to destroy their religion. So you'd have 3 layers: sociological, immediate, and psychological. That's a comprehensive answer.
Fantastic. What about another potential question connecting this chapter to the previous one? Estimate the valiant struggle of Cradock against the British.
For that, you'd focus on his story. His refusal to pay kist or tribute, his confrontation with the collector, his escape, his alliance with the South Indian Confederacy, and his ultimate martyrdom. But to really get top marks, you should write a concluding paragraph that contrasts his feudal stance fighting for his kingdom with the sepoy nature of the Vellore Mutiny. That shows the examiner you understand the broader historical transition from Chapter 9 to Chapter 10.
Connecting the dots. That's what it's all about.
You know, there's one more question from the source text worth mentioning. Which Governor General introduced the subsidiary system?
Ah, that's a classic UPSC favorite.
It is Lord Wellesley. And while he wasn't the Governor General during the mutiny, that was technically Sir George Barlow in Calcutta and Bentinck. In Madras, Wellesley's aggressive policies of expansion were what put Tipu's family in that fort in the first place. His subsidiary alliance system created the pressure cooker environment across India. It's all connected.
It really is a web of causes and consequences. Okay, let's wrap this up. Let's do a final summary.
So, to summarize our deep dive, in 1806, the British, under Commander Sir John Cradock, tried to force a new European-style turban on their Indian sepoys. This, combined with deep-seated resentment from past wars, racial arrogance, and a powerful fear of Christian conversion, triggered a violent mutiny in Vellore Fort.
The sepoys killed their officers, raised Tipu Sultan's flag, and tried to restore the old Mysore rule.
But due to a lack of organized leadership and the lightning-fast, brutal response of Colonel Gillespie, the mutiny was crushed within hours in a horrific massacre.
And here's a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to chew on. The source text mentions that while the native rulers fought for their own kingdoms, the Vellore Mutiny was a spontaneous outflow of sepoy feelings. But think about Colonel Forbes. On June 17th, he had the truth in his hands, a direct warning from Mustafa Beg. If he had listened, if he had just investigated, would the history of Indian resistance have looked completely different?
Or was the racial prejudice of the British so deep and the grievances of the sepoys so strong that a clash was inevitable, regardless of that specific warning? Was 1806 just a dress rehearsal that the British failed to learn from, making the inferno of 1857 absolutely unavoidable?
That is the tragedy of history. Sometimes the writing is on the wall, or in this case, in the warning report of a loyal sepoy, and no one bothers to read it until it's too late.
Indeed.
All right, that's our deep dive for today. If you want the premium notes for this chapter, including those model mains answers we just discussed, you know what to do. Join the private Telegram library, the link is in the description, or just DM us on the public channel.
And please don't forget to like, share, and comment. It really helps the algorithm find other history buffs like you.
And of course, a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You keep this series alive. We appreciate every single one of you.
Keep learning.
And keep questioning. We'll see you in the next deep dive.